learning, we can raise family incomes for the poor and the near poor, and we can improve the quality of teaching and learning in schools, which I know is something that many of you are working on very actively. So I want to thank all the funders who were behind the work that I've shown you here. I want to thank the many friends and colleagues who not only asked me, so are you ready for that talk at APPAM, but actually offered, like, I'm willing to look at your slides, or sent me slides or graphs that I could use. Thank you all for being such an attentive audience. You've been, fabulous. It is a lot of graphs. It's a lot of data. But it's better than a lot of words. It could have just been a lot of words. So for me, this is about as engaging a PowerPoint as I can do. So this is a lot of graphs. Yeah, no. And I want to end by saying I hope to see many of you in London in June, where we're going to have an international conference on the theme of inequalities. So the call for papers is going to go out soon, and I hope to see many of you there. So I was supposed to get that in, and here it is. It's in my slides. I know, there it is. It's there. So we have time for questions. And then at some point, Angela will appear and give me a plaque to thank me for having done such an engaging presentation. And then we'll go and have drinks. So it's all good. It's just... It's all good. So questions, comments? Why didn't we do Denmark? That's always a question. There's one there, yep. I would really love to take several questions rather than go back and forth, because if I just answer one question, I'll go on forever, and then we won't have any more time. I was pointing to the person behind you, Bob, but that's fine. More questions? Neighborhoods? Yep.
If you could talk about what you think are the kind of political things that explain some of it.
Yeah. Okay, neighborhoods, politics. Other questions? Labor markets. Yep. Race, issues around race, racism. Yep.
Possible variation in the population sizes between those countries, not necessarily
Yeah, okay. That's probably enough for me to keep him open.
This is on the other side of what's possible, but thoughts on the guaranteed minimum income would be interesting.
Yeah, guaranteed minimum income, that's good. We had a really good session this morning. Look at Tim's falling out of his chair. There was a really good session this morning about the Tony Atkinson book, and one of the things he calls for, it's a book about what next after Piketty, and one of the things he calls for is a universal child allowance. And so we were talking this morning about political feasibility of a universal child allowance, which of course is where I'm going when I say maintain and expand supports for low-income families. That's exactly what I have in mind. And so it does run into the politics. And so we had a good conversation this morning about whether that's politically feasible, and I guess I'm kind of optimistic now that it is. There seems to be a lot of support across parties for investing in young children. So yeah, around the politics, Becky was talking at lunch today, Becky Blank in her exemplar address, about trust in government and just the low levels of trust in government in the United States. And I was thinking about the US-Canadian comparison. So my co-author Miles Korak had done some great work for Pew a few years ago, showing that Canadians and Americans have similar aspirations and similar hopes and dreams for the future about opportunity, and but where they differ, they both endorse the American dream. Even though it's called the American dream, the Canadians also endorse it. But where they differ is in what they see the role of government is. So Canadians not only endorse this, but they expect and want their government to do things to advance it. Whereas Americans want government to just get out of the way and not interfere with the American dream. So I do think this, low level of trust in government just undermines our ability to do these things. And so, I mean, we were mindful of politics, and it's why we didn't talk about neighborhoods and measures to, sort of redistribute kids across schools or resources across neighborhoods. We didn't really feel like we could tackle segregation, that there was much we could do about that. Yeah, labor markets, it's an interesting question. We thought by just talking about increasing the minimum wage, that was the most important, the sort of clearest one in terms of thinking about raising earnings. So the issue of race and diversity, population size, I think race is a big factor in how Americans think about a lot of these issues, and I think it really gets in the way for us much more than it does in other countries. One of the things that I was asked when we were first doing this work was to redo these graphs. How much of that SES gap in the United States is because we have a more diverse population? So if you did this, if you took out all the black children and Hispanic children, or all the black children and all the immigrant children, would the U.S. still have a bigger gap? On the assumption being that the answer would be no, that we would look more like the other countries. And we were very resistant to doing that because it's like, what experiment are you running? I just don't understand. What question are you asking? I just didn't understand the question. And we were very reluctant to do this, but we do get asked it all the time. So in the technical appendix, which is posted on the Russell Sage website, and which I think is riveting reading, you will find the graph where we take out the black kids and the Hispanic kids. I think we take out all the immigrant kids. And so we just have non-Hispanic white kids in the US, and the gap comes down, instead of being a full standard deviation, I think it's about 0.85. It's about 0.85. So it is still significantly larger than in the other countries, right? Even if you ran that weird experiment. So the low SES kids that we're talking about here, they're not Hispanic kids and black kids. There's a lot of white non-Hispanic kids. But we immediately go to race in this country. And it comes back to the politics as well. A lot of the politics, there's that great book by Marty Gilens, The Color of Welfare. And we have racialized attitudes towards welfare. And so these things are not unconnected. I mean, I have such admiration for the work that Sheldon and Martha did in their book about the war on poverty and the extent to which they brought in the civil rights movement. And so the book was not just about the war on poverty, it was about the civil rights movement. And so I tried to bring the civil rights issues and the issues around race into the beginning of this because they're so related. They're so related. And I think it also relates to this point about setting higher expectations and providing more support for low-achieving students. I think this actually is hugely important. I think we have a tendency in this country to take kids who test low at the start of school, kids who fall behind, we consign them to a separate space. We put them in special ed, we hold them back, we put them in the slow group, we put them in the non-academic track, much more so than these peer countries. Right? I pulled out the graph about retention, the share of kids that we retain, and how socially graded that is. We retain so many more kids than these other countries do, and it's much more socially graded. I think it's in Australia. They retain maybe 5% of their kids, hold them back, and it has nothing to do with SES. It's completely uncorrelated with SES. Kids are held back if they have a really serious learning issue. In the UK, they don't hold anybody back, so we couldn't even have them in the graph. They just don't do it. We hold kids back repeatedly. And by high school, we kind of wish they would just leave because nobody wants to teach them. They're in separate classes. And that's unbelievably confounded with race. It's just unbelievably confounded with race. And so these low expectations are absolutely tied up with race. And so, yeah, so you can come at it from the lens of race, you can come at it from the lens of SES, but either way, these things are very entwined. And it's a very different approach to say all these kids can achieve, especially, you know, those kids who came in with the high scores to start with and they're losing ground. That's just tragic. And, you know, a vision that all those kids can achieve and that all kids need extra help, and then with extra help, everybody can achieve is a very different vision. And would in turn change our attitudes around race. So I do think the things are very entwined. But with that, we really are at 6 o'clock. So.
This was really a wonderful presentation, and it takes me back like 40 years, and I keep thinking about, we keep hearing these things, and there's such a collective wisdom in this crowd. So if we just don't have the will, not us, but there's just not this will. So the more we can show things and have the data to back it up and inform decision making and keep pushing, maybe in the next 40 years we won't be having this conversation again. But I wanted to present this. This is it's a token of our appreciation of APPAM members and leadership for Jane's leadership as president of APPAM this year. So let's congratulate Jane on that.
Thank you.
Jane, it was,
So
it
nice.
was a great job,
Yes,
Jane.
thank you.
What a great
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you. Did you want me to tell them the presidential reception? Or do you want to tell them? Why don't you?
So we now go to have a drink, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
The presidential reception.
And the drink is going to be downstairs, and it
Jasmine,
starts
now.
It starts
Now.
now. So downstairs, yeah.
Very good, Jane. It was great.